My name's Morgan. You all know me from the online class. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about my midterm work. The reasons why I choose a lot of these materials that I've been using is based on this idea of the found object. I really like to kind of create these stories or these narratives with these objects and develop the thought process beyond just what the objects can mean and try to elevate them to more of like this story about the possible person who could have owned it or the meaning that could have been behind the object. So I really like to delve into going into finding these objects as sort of this eclectic array of things that sort of have the overall tone of domesticity, of like the domestic life, the household life. Some are vintage, some are just still contemporary ideas and like pieces that just seem to have some sort of meaning, and I like to go with an overall theme for the work that I do. So if it's involving like a figure, then I like to create more of a figure out of it. Or even if it's something that could have been used by hand, I enjoy turning it into still this like array of a persona that can be just embodied within it. So for this piece, with the two figures, it's an installation piece, and I sort of put them together with the idea of creating these bodies or these actual figures. And in my previous work, during my 15-hour, they said that they wanted more movement, more tenacity, and more like vibrance to the work. So I wanted to incorporate things like limbs and movement through like the paint that I applied to the surface of these materials. And I wanted it to have sort of this solid put together finishedness that I think that the paint really serves in doing. And the paint sort of stands for blood and the body, because it is coming from that place. And the pieces within this work are meant to sort of act as it's like a ritual, essentially, kind of ritualistic. I found that every time I work with these objects, especially like dolls or like things of that nature, they seem personal. And so I wanted it to kind of elevate it to keeping these objects still pristine, not tearing them apart, but putting them up as a sort of like to be worshipped platform. So I'm kind of playing with this idea of worship and the idea of what the object can bring to the table, and especially with all of the significance that it has. And I wanted it to sort of have this deeper meaning to it that is reflected through what it's being like presented as, rather than just having these objects all podged together. I want them to form this sort of creature, this sort of belief system that we're so obsessed with buying and getting these objects and holding on, but then easily throwing them away, which is why I go and get them from yard sales, thrift stores, Goodwill, that sort of thing. It's sort of like repurposing old objects that weren't previously, that were previously cared about, but when they were discarded, the meaning behind them kind of dissipated. So I want to give more of that meaning back to them, give more significance back to these objects. This next piece that I'm talking about is a wall piece, and within it I'm using found objects such as a spatula, this weird material that you use to open jars with that I collected a lot of, that grippy stuff. And I'm also using ironing boards, and so what I did was I layered them so that they have this looming effect on the viewer, so it's kind of coming towards you, because I didn't want it to be just something flat stuck on the wall. I like to break out of that stipulation. So I essentially have this like figure. She sort of looks religious in a way, with her halo headdress, which is a purse, and then it has like this cascading sort of silhouette, and the way I have the material attached to the piece, it very cascades like a woman's figure. I also have this sign mounted underneath that's meant to be scumbled. If you look at it from far away, you can make it out a lot clearer rather than up close. But what it says is it says God loves you no matter what underneath. And it sort of reminds me of this very like religious woman, which is sort of why I have her kind of floating up on the wall. And then underneath, coming out of it, is a old school vintage Dr. Scholl's foot massager. The overall color tone are these very soft tones of like a baby blue and white, as well as like this cream tone, because I wanted it to be more of a soft piece rather than the intensity that you see in some of my other work, where I'm going to be using like vibrant colors such as pink and like bright yellows and reds and greens. I wanted this to sort of be an experimentation with this softness, as well as an interplay of femininity within the work. So I'm sort of exploring this feministic approach of showing these objects and how they can like interrelate. And it's based in humor, because it's sort of taking on this aspect. There's a 99-cent sticker on the plaque that I got, so it's sort of like 99-cent wisdom. So I have a couple completely finished works, which is that wall piece with the God loves you sign, and spatula. And then the other one's going to be that installation that I have. I think that's how I want to have it displayed. I like the way the fabric is moving, and it draws the eye back around, kind of in this circle back to the bloody figure, for lack of a better term, which is comprised from these bodices that I made from little pieces of like hay sticks. And then we have like that table, and the black is sort of this like ominous color. That's completed. So I have those that I'm really, really happy with. And then I have some more works in process. I have, I think, 3 total that are in process right now. I have a lot of ideas for them. So I have the materials for the pink piece that I'm doing, which is going to be that laundry netting that I want to fill, and sort of my idea is to have it standing and with like legs coming up off of it. So it's going to be kind of creepy and funny in the manner of how it's going to be positioned, but it's going to be very sort of like a creature almost, because it's going to have this characteristic of femininity based on like the color pink and like these like really like enlightening tones. It's going to be very bright, but also very creepy and statuesque in the way that it's going to be standing. It's going to be kind of uncomfortable to look at. And I have the placemats that I want to kind of have at the feet, where it's going to be like turning the room pink. I'll probably expand on that. And I have this material, so once it's stuffed, I'm going to like hide the stuffing because it looks kind of cheap. So I'm going to have like this materials that are kind of like going to be layers and layers of material, so it's going to have this like movement to it as well. So I haven't found all the materials that I want to use on that yet, but it's coming along. And then I also have the fireplace piece with the fur and the cats, which is sort of like our inner cat lady, I guess is the way that I describe it so far, where I'm going to be manipulating the metal more, breaking more out of the form. It's sort of wearing this vest of fur. I want to find some more fur to kind of incorporate into it, because it's sort of this really softness of the fur, whereas all this bent and twisted metal of the fireplace itself that's sort of like coming out and apart, and then the cats that are creating these nice shadows. So I want to play with the shadows for sure with this piece and what I can like accomplish for it. And it's going to be seen in the round, so I need to start working on the back side of it and bringing more materials onto it. I like the fur because it feels less like a stuck-on material, and it feels something that I can kind of like bring into the piece and incorporate around it and bend it and have wires coming through it, so it still is going to kind of seem alive in its own way. And then there's that wall piece, which is the window. And that I really wanted to sort of be this look box, essentially, that is, it's gonna have a lot of found boxes and a lot of things inside of the boxes, so sort of like an interactive piece. And you're gonna be able to open them, close them, look into them, and it's sort of like this, rather than it being the shape of a person or a being, rather than it being a being, it's going to sort of be a window into this person's life and this being that I want it to reflect. So I'm also experimenting with like the fireplace and the window piece are sort of these like gateways into a world, whereas the other pieces are sort of these freestanding forms of the actual literal person's world, if that makes sense. So recently I've been looking at a lot of artists because I'm looking into Shanique Smith and how she uses fabric, but I've also been drawn recently to Joseph Cornell and his boxes, his lookbook boxes, because the way that he talks about it is like he's not interested in the trash and dead truths and thrown away things. He's more looking into these moments of miraculous nostalgia and creating these interactive things that you can touch and play with and do all sorts of things, but they still have this notion of like memory. So Joseph Cornell also did these like sort of visual documentary dossiers, which are like compiled images of themes and things that very much interested him, and so that's sort of where he got his ideas for those boxes. And I found that to be really helpful because I need this when it comes to doing these object-based work. I go into it with a particular idea, but if I don't write it down, like when I'm finding these objects, I kind of sometimes lose sight of what I was originally intending these things to be used for. So it's helpful for me to have this systematic way of organizing these objects and keeping them, how should I put it, on the right track, and myself on the right track when I'm looking for them. So I love the overall experience of finding these nostalgic pieces and tying them back to these previously notioned ideas or themes in my work, which is why a lot of the pieces look different. They're not all, paintings with the same tones or, creations that are gonna always have the same color scheme, but they're sort of playing on different themes within each piece, but the overall notion of nostalgia and memory and possibility, as well as a fictional character, even in some of them. Sometimes I feel that the only way to bring about what I want the viewer to take away is to create that character, but that's not necessarily my focus for every single piece. Not every single piece is an anthropomorphic creation of a person, and I don't want to pigeonhole myself down that road, which is why I do those wall pieces and the freestanding pieces that are also just object-based. And so I'm sort of creating these look boxes without putting them in a frame, sort of using the objects themselves as the frame. So yeah, I feel like I've come a long way this quarter, and albeit I had a rough start, but it's definitely taken a nice trajectory, and I feel like I'm back on track with these works. So I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say about it. Thank you.